Welcome, it's Laurie of Laurie's Heirloom Sewing. Today is Opportunity Tuesday, and I decided I wanted to paint today. I probably will sew at some point. I do have some projects in mind, but for right now at 7:30 in the morning on a Tuesday, I decided I'm painting. So, if you want to go along on this journey with me, stick around. What I have here are two glasses with water. One is for my darker colors and one is for the lighter colors. I usually just pick these up at thrift stores. You can sometimes find them for like 5 cents, 10 cents. I do have to use a roll of paper towels or a partial roll of paper towels when I'm painting. I don't like the idea of being wasteful, but I don't have something else in mind right now that I could use. I just wet my canvas moments ago by dipping my flat brush in clear water and then brushing it onto this little bitty canvas, because I personally have found, and trust me, I'm not an artist, I'm not an expert in acrylic paint, but I do know that when I'm painting on this type of canvas board, it really does help. I don't know if the gesso process, if this is like a really old canvas that got sent out. I never know, and sometimes, because I always order these on Amazon, non-sponsored, just something I do. But it really helps the acrylic to adhere to these little canvases if I pre-wet them with, water on a paintbrush. That's all I can tell you. Okay, so the other setup that I do is I have a, well, here, I'll just show you this. It's called palette paper. It's probably backwards because I'm using my phone camera forward facing, but it does actually say Strathmore palette paper, 40 sheets. They're 12 inches by 16 inches. This is the 300 series, and I basically just put my paints on this. It feels like wax paper. Before I got this, I used to just use a small piece of aluminum foil, but I like the convenience of the palette paper. So today I am going to do a background. This is Burnt Umber Liquitex Basics. And when I put my paint out, I just kind of touch the top of the paint to the palette paper so I don't get too much. If I have found that if I squeeze it, from up here, I'm going to have a mess. Okay, I need to locate. This is a golden artist color phthalo green, and it's the phthalo green blue shade. It's been outside on my painting table outside, so I don't know how it's going to respond. And I'm just going to make sure that my brush stays wet. Grab a paper towel. And I'm going to blend this with this. I do want to get quite a bit of the paint on my brush, but it doesn't have to be carefully blended. And I'm sorry about the dogs. For some reason today, they're both just wound up. Okay. I don't really know what this technique is called. It's just something I do to get the background I want. And it's basically, I'm just kind of flicking my paintbrush back and forth over the canvas. Now, one of the things about acrylic paint that I do know from experience, once it starts to dry, you do not want to be messing around with it. It's going to peel up. It's just going to break your heart is what it's going to do. So basically when I get past about halfway, especially on one of these small canvases, I just kind of quit fiddling with it too much. Now I'm adding a lot of the brown at the bottom and the green a little bit more at the top. And all of this will be adjusted as I go. I don't know if you're real experienced with painting. I have no idea where everybody is, but I do know I can easily tell you that your painting will go through the beginning phase, which is where I was over here, and then all of a sudden you're going to be in what I call the ugly phase, and you think, oh, why did I even do this? But all of a sudden, somewhere along the way, your eye decides, oh, we've exited the ugly phase and we're now into the pretty phase. Not quite there yet. Just getting the canvas covered up. Okay, now I'm not going to mess with this until this dries. This is a long process if you don't have a hairdryer, which I happen to have. So I'm going to dry my canvas, picking up this paint, and I'm going to clean out my paintbrush because while my canvas is drying, the paint on this paintbrush would also be drying, and I don't want that to happen. I'm also not going to lay out any more paint. I don't want to have to use wax paper to cover it up, and therefore I'm not going to do that. So I just kind of let my palette be a palette without anything on it. And as soon as I can stand up, I will get this dry and then I'll be back for more. Alrighty, I am back. My canvas is dry. I'm going to put out some titanium white. It's just Liquitex Basics titanium white. And some Mars black, which is one of my favorite blacks. And a little bit of, I hope that's, I think it's burnt sienna. Yeah, it is. I have so many browns, it's hard to keep up. And without my glasses on, oh my goodness. Okay. So, I'm going to use an angle brush. This one just happens to be a Princeton Art and Brush Company angle shader half. Every paintbrush has a different number. I just buy based on what I like. When I see the paintbrush, it's like, okay, I like that one. Now what I'm doing over here is I'm going to make a test color. Which will be sort of a browny gray color. With a little bit more of the burnt sienna. Okay, yeah. I don't have in my possession pre-mixed Van Dyke brown, but it's one of my faves. I'm just going to kind of cover up some of the spots that did not get, you know, fully shaded, fully colored, fully dealt with. Up here. The reason I'm using this is because I can turn it sideways and make those types of lines, etc. And at this particular moment, all I'm really looking for is areas that I need to cover that have white dots showing through from my canvas. Some of this will be covered up with different colors and different shapes, but I don't want to start out with white dots. And I am trying to create kind of a layered look. I've noticed that dark colors tend to look like they're far back. Lighter colors tend to look like they're closer to the front. Okay. A little bit of water. And I'm just kind of making some curves, straight lines. You can turn the paintbrush on its side and just kind of do that sort of thing. Now I'm going to put down some of my burnt umber. Blend that in on the top. Excuse my sleeve. And that'll be a little bit darker. But depending on the amount of black you add, you know, you'll get kind of a gray-brown, sort of a muddy gray, which is, you know, a fairly common color in nature. It's not that uncommon. Okay, it looks like we're really getting some good coverage that's actually sticking. And I am now going to just add some straight up pure Mars Black using this angle brush as a straight liner like this. And I'm varying where I'm putting angle. I'm either going to the right or to the left. I'm starting at the bottom and working my way up with the point down at the bottom. I'm going to pick up some of the white and then just go right alongside those. Funny little lines that I've made. Okay. Now, because I have the brown, I do see some white still showing through. I'm going to grab a little bit more of the burnt umber and just kind of tap that in. I really want this canvas basically closed up. I want all the white covered up. Okay. Here we go. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. All right. I will say that I have been very disappointed with the quality of these these little canvases that I bought, and I can't stand it. I don't remember. I know I bought them on Amazon, but I don't know the brand. I don't know anything. I'll have to really go back and dig through my Amazon order history to get that information. But I've never had a problem with my canvases not absorbing paint like this particular batch. Thankfully, it was a small size and they weren't that expensive. This is phthalo green, blue shade again. And thankfully, I only have a few more to go. But the larger canvases that I've purchased, I've been very, very lucky. They've just been magnificent as far as working for me. Okay, next to that, I've put a little dollop of CAD Yellow. And I am going to use this bright that I think is clean. Not seeing any transfer. Okay, get some clean water. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the CAD green, a little bit, or excuse me, the phthalo green and the CAD Yellow. Mix those together with a little bit of the titanium white for a little bit lighter green to kind of add. And I always just mix a little bit when I'm blending and mixing paint. I want to make sure that I'm going to like the color before I have like a whole blob of it. I've always been like that. And if I like it, then I'll just go back in, load up my brush, and then just kind of flick some of that color in there. And I may be going over some of those little lines that I created before. But for me, it's all about just kind of deciding where I want things to be. And if I'm not 100% sure, then I'll go over something I've painted, or I'll avoid it at all costs and try to not cover it up. Okay. Now I'm just going to add some straight CAD, or keep saying that, phthalo green blue shade. I am using the end of my brush, this flat brush. Get a little bit of water. I love to add curves like this with my paintbrush. I think it's such a cool technique. Okay. Now, shockingly, right on top, let this sit in the clear water. And I'm going to grab some more of my Mars Black. Keep that close to me right here on the end. I'm going to add some of the burnt umber right next to it, about equal parts. And I'm going to mix these together with my little angle brush. And I get a really nice dark brown that I think is close to Van Dyke brown. All right, and kind of coming off the edge here. I don't like the way that looks. Hold on just a sec. There we go. I'm just kind of blending. I had a little blob right there. Okay. Get some water. And I'm just going to kind of create and I didn't really measure the, you know, how far up I was. I feel like that, for me, that just needs to be organic. I don't know. I'm not going to, you know, I'm not going to say, let's go a third of the way up or half of the way down. I just pick a spot. Okay. Just thinning, I'm not really cleaning it off. I had quite a bit of paint on there. Okay. I want this to be really thick right here. This is the, I mean, we're standing very close to this tree branch. So it would be really large in our line of vision right here. We're basically under the tree, so to speak. All right, I'm gonna let that soak, and I'm gonna grab this round. It's number 6, according to Princeton Art. I'm gonna wet my paintbrush and then just get some of this dark brown that I mixed up. Kind of fill a few of these spots that are thin. I don't want that background to come through. This needs to be a very stark contrast. Okay. I really want some thin paint now, so I'm using some water. Okay. And I'm going to have branches coming off. This paint is more of like an inky consistency. I need it to really flow. And you know, tree branches are interesting in how they grow. Some are basically left to be a tree branch without interference from humans, and some tree branches get cut and they do what's called, they sucker. I know that sounds strange, but the tree will put out another branch. The tree's whole goal in life is to exist. And sometimes our interference will help, and sometimes our interference is just not good, and we can actually compromise the health of the tree. And they end up, you know, really kind of messing themselves up trying to replicate or reproduce what they had before we cut them. So if you pollard or if you top a tree, pollarding is preferred, really, a tree would tell you. Trust me, I know. But if you top a tree and leave it, it's going to try really hard to grow back what you took off. And it could be seriously to the detriment of that tree. So sometimes if you happen to see a tree that just looks really weird, like, you know, what in the world happened? It could be that it was topped. It could be that somebody tried to pollard, which is to go inside and cut tree branches out to thin it. You know, you could just end up with a big old mess on your hands. And the poor trees, they just don't look happy at all. But a tree left to its own devices will usually be fine until it's not, and then it will die and fall. Okay, now I may end up creating some more things here, but for the moment, I'm going to let this just kind of cook. To me, it looks like it's going off at an angle, so I'm kind of happy about that. I do want to add some sparks of light in the back, so I'm going to use some of this. This is called light green, and it is a nudge paint. I was never really thrilled with these guys. They're very watery, very thin. None of them, even their titanium white, which titanium white typically is a very opaque paint. The Nudge brand did not deliver that to me. So I've not purchased them again, but I will use what I have. And I'm just going to add some light, and then I will add some dark. Behind it. Okay. All right. I am going to add a little dot of CAD orange to my palette paper. The lid for my CAD orange decided to break. Not its fault, I did it. I dropped it and it broke. A little bit more of my titanium white. I always have at least 3 tubes of titanium white. Either 3 tubes of just pure titanium white, or 2 tubes of titanium white and 1 of the buff titanium or unbleached titanium. And I use those a lot. My round brush. Okay, and now I'm going to pick up some white and I'm going to pick up some of the orange, and I'm not blending. What I'm going to do is just dab it on. I want my tree to be unique. This time I'll do orange and white. Orange and white. White and orange. I often will just kind of mix that up. And I'm turning my paintbrush so that I'm not getting a constant on the design. It needs to be different. And I don't mind having a texture to this. It's actually one of my favorite things about acrylic paint. It's not flat. It does have some landscape, some geography to it. And I don't know what kind of tree this is. It's a made up in the mind of Laurie tree. It could be something, I don't know. Don't really think I want any more back there, but they are going off of my canvas. Okay, I'm going to rinse this brush out. I keep hearing the horns on the boat ferry. There's probably more than one. Okay, now I'm using some primary red. Just put it over here beside this orange and white. How do you say orange? Do you say orange? Orange? Is there sort of an H-y sound in there? Let me know in the comments how it comes from where you live. All right, and now I am mixing some of that primary red. I'm just making a mess on my paintbrush, and I'm just gonna dab that in wherever I feel like it. Some of those little dabs will look red, some will look pink, some will look sort of a salmon-y color. But that's kind of the way Mother Nature uses her paintbrush, so I'm going to try to replicate in my little attempt. I like using the top part of a round brush for these types of leaves. It doesn't work for every type of leaf, but it does for this. And you can add detail later. You could use a smaller brush or just, you know, put in some actual designy kind of leaves. Got a little bit more orange that time. Okay, if you add white, it will give dimension where you might not have had it before. I recommend you try that. If you're having trouble with some of the colors looking a little blended, a little bit too much blended, just throw in some white. And at some point a little bit of a darker color that we'll get to. Like right there just looks a little bit muddy to me. Swizzle stick that paintbrush. Now I'm going to use, not this guy, he's too small. The smaller, this one is the Princeton Art round number 6. So, okay, so I'm going to wet this brush. And I'm going to pick up some brown, just on the very, very tip. And I'm going to just kind of tap him in there. You don't want too much water because it might run. And you can also use a different color, you know, like a blue or a green or a yellow. I'm using brown just for one thing because I have it right here. For another, that's what my eye was looking for, was some little brown centers. I don't know if you can hear that off in the distance, but that is the ferry crossing over to Whitby. And that would be my dog Bam Bam, who has decided to let his voice be heard this morning. He's such a silly little puppy. He's 2. He'll be 3 in February. A few more little dots up in here. Okay. Now I'm going to let that dry, and while that's drying, I'm going to take my piece of chalk. This piece of chalk is just too small. Well, I'll have to use it because I don't think I have any other. Actually, I do have some better chalk. Let's try this. I saw my face. Oh boy. I'm just going to sketch in right here on this little spot right here. My little guy I named Chickadee Deedle. Chickadee Deedle is one of my favorite